Many not-for-profit groups in the Cassowary coast work tirelessly throughout the year to help those in times of need. This is especially so at Christmas time. Donations from the Cassowary Coast Regional Council Christmas Appeal go directly to these not-for-profit groups to assist our local community.
We have been a recipient of the Community Christmas Appeal monies probably for as long as it's been going each year. So we get to see the difference that it makes in families and the feedback, after the fact. We see people come to tears thinking that someone else who's local is actually giving to help a family such as theirs.
I love the idea of a partnership of whether it be council or churches, whoever, this time of year, coming together to be able to provide support in whether it be monetary or whether it be other areas to help people in need in our community. Every person in the community cares, everyone does, but it's the opportunity to do that by donating and to help those less fortunate than themselves. I would encourage people to be able to dig a little bit deeper at Christmas for people who are in that place who are struggling a little bit this year.
This money is very important to us because it means that we can help community. We have a lot of people presenting at Christmas time who don't have the funds to put food on the table or to buy toys for their kids. So it helps us do what we do at Christmas time.
It's quite rare in this day and age that in the area of donations and giving, that every cent actually goes through to a family on the ground or a person on the ground. There's no staffing costs or admin costs that come out of that. That's really unique and something to be quite proud of.
Fellow councillors, staff and residents viewing via live stream, good morning all and welcome. I acknowledge the traditional owners and caretakers of the land on which this meeting is being held and pay my respect to the elders past, present and emerging. Would you please be upstanding as Pastor Rob McGarry from the Tully Family Church delivers the opening prayer.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you for the privilege of coming again to attend the meeting. It is a real privilege. I'd like to read from Luke chapter 2 and verses 10 and 11. And in the scripture it says, "Then the angel said to them, 'Do not be afraid, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which will be to all people. For there is born to you this day in the city of David a Saviour, who is Christ the Lord.'" So good tidings of great joy to all people. That's still the same message that God has for us today. There is born to you today a Saviour, who is Christ Jesus. Behind all the commercialisation of Christmas, the advertisements, the tinsel, the task of purchasing presents, which no doubt many of us are doing now, or if you're good preparation, maybe 6 months ago, the preparation for gatherings, Christmas trees, beyond the busyness, is something holy. A sense of the presence of God and joy and goodwill. Of his kindness and compassion for a less than perfect human race. I think we all qualify for that. This was front and centre in Jesus' interactions with all those he made contact with the sick, the oppressed, the underprivileged, the outcast, and ordinary people who made contact with him. Everywhere you read, there was joy. There was such a welcoming of him because of what he did and for them. Those who weren't so pleased were the self-righteous leaders of the day, who didn't share his heart for people. And in great encouragement this Christmas is that God has a heart for people and he wants to help them, encourage them, minister to them, lift them up out of their whatever position they're finding themselves in. He doesn't change, and no matter where we're placed, there remains hope and encouragement in him and joy unspeakable. And there's something about coming to know the presence of God that brings great joy into your heart and lifts you up of wherever you are, whatever circumstance you're in. What's left for us is simply to turn to him, to seek him out, to go behind the front of Christmas and find out what's behind it. Wise men and women still seek him out. Let's pray. Lord, we just thank you for your presence here and that you came for a people who were broken, and that includes us, Lord. You came for us to lift us up. And Lord, thank you. There's great hope for every person in the Cassowary Shire, Lord. There's great hope. There remains a place where they can find peace and joy. And Lord, this Christmas, we just pray that our hearts will be open to you. We would seek you out. We would have the wisdom to know where to go. And Lord, again, I thank you for this council. Thank you for the people who are serving here, Lord, and giving of themselves day and night. And Lord, I just pray you would encourage them today, that as they leave today, they'll know they've done whatever you've asked of them to do. And I pray, Lord, that this would be a really fruitful meeting. Just lift up each one of them in prayer right now in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Thanks, mate. Thanks, mate.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
To you too.
With your permission, Mr. Mayor, I wonder if standing orders could be suspended for a short period of time.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you.
How are you, Mr. Mayor?
Good.
Good to see you.
How are you?
I'm very, very well.
Big surprise. Sounds like a setup.
Yes, that's a really good way of putting it. There's no punked anymore, or no candid camera, or anything like that. That's
You're at live stream, mate.
let's call this for what it is. This is a great opportunity for me to be here. I was very honoured to have been asked by a CEO and with permission of the Local Government Association of Queensland to be able to present a long service award to you for 15 years of service in local government, and I think it's important to note that that local service, as someone who's offered themselves up to be somebody elected by the public, to be part of local democracy has been terrific. But we should not forget that all of us as elected people, no matter whether it's in state, local or federal, have all had lives before that. And I think it's worth noting that you've been a community person long before you were elected to council. And that's, I think, a very, very important part of today. It's 15 years plus. Work you've done advocating for workers, and of course just being involved in local sporting organisations, community organisations. And it's great obviously to have Marsha here today as well, because behind every great man is a far better woman. And it's wonderful that you're here, because obviously Marsha has equally been involved in a range of different local service clubs, particularly the Lionesses of Innisfail. And no person who's in a leadership role or elected role can do their job without the support of their family. So, Marsha, this is as much a tribute to you today as it is to the Mayor. On a personal note, I would just want to say how pleased I am that you are the Mayor and the leadership role that you're playing now. It's something that has been, I think, a long time coming, and it's pleasing to see that you've been able to achieve that. And I think the people of the Cassowary Coast will be the better for it. I'm really pleased to call you a friend and someone who's worked with you in my capacity as a local member and in a former cabinet positions as well. But most importantly, that friendship is something that's meant a lot to me and my family, and I want to acknowledge my father Warren's here today as well, who's also had a long history working with you in your various roles. But Mark Nolan, congratulations. It's an honour to tribute to you.
As always, I have the right of reply. This is not my valedictory speech. Thank you all for this special acknowledgement. There is no greater honour or privilege than serving in public office. Special thanks to my good mate Curtis for being present to officiate. Greatly appreciated, comrade. Extra special thanks to my wife Marsha and family for your unwavering support on this 15-year journey in local government. There are 4 generations of my family here today. Marsha, Natasha, Brianna, Michaela, and my great-granddaughter, Rylan. I would also like to mention my campaign advisor over the last 4 successful campaigns, Peter Roberts, the CEO at Arena Home. Special mention is warranted there. 4 political mentors, people who instilled politics into my DNA that I would like to reflect on. Former Minister Bill Eaton, former Shire Chairman Ross Overton, sadly both passed, and the Pitt dynasty, former Minister Warren and current Speaker of the Queensland Parliament and former Treasurer Curtis Pitt. Friends for life. Thank you for being here. In conclusion, I've enjoyed the journey thus far, despite the inevitable highs and lows of politics. Like an airline pilot, there have been periods of turbulence. Importantly, local government is the closest to the people of all 3 levels of government, and I am passionate about my role in delivering the best possible outcomes for our stakeholders, the residents of Cassowary Coast. Thank you. Yeah, you want to do that? Yeah, I think so. Okay. Because we've got special guests here, we are now going to adjourn for morning tea. Thank you. Councillors and staff, I'll reconvene the meeting. Are there any apologies? Take that as a no. Move on to declaration of conflict. Declaration of prescribed conflict of interest or declarable conflicts of interest. Please use this opportunity to make public any prescribed conflict of interest or declarable conflict of interest in respect of the items in the agenda. Councillors should use this opportunity to disclose and or comment on other councillors and or staff interests in accordance with the Act and the regulations. Councillors, are there any conflicts to declare? Take that as a no. Thank you. We'll move on to item 1, the confirmation of the minutes of the meeting, the 26th of November 2020. Would somebody move that they're a true and accurate record, please? Moved by Councillor Barnes, seconded by Councillor Pervin. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 2, any business arising from the minutes? Yes, Councillor Chewy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I would just like to apologise to the people of Paradise Run. I misunderstood the... Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to apologise to the organisers of the Paradise Run. I did give a little blurb at the last meeting that we should all attend. I did attend, came second last, but I did attend. But I misunderstood the address, and it's at the Seaview Street at Mission Beach. I misunderstood. I was confused between the Life Saving Club and the Life Saving Hut. So I apologise to the Paradise Run people. It's a great event. And yes, I hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification, Councillor Chewy. Any further business arising? If not, I'll move on to item 3, community and culture. Item 3.1, page 38, the Tully Community Youth Support Centre. And Ms Saffron will present this report.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Morning, Ms Saffron.
Tully Support Centre. So historically, Cardwell and then Cassowary Coast have supported the Tully Support Centre to the value of about $63,000 per annum. This includes $32,500 in financial support to provide a part-time youth worker to that service, and also $30,500 for the use of the Mullins building in the showgrounds. This has happened over the past 15 years, and originally was $25,000 and was increased to $32,000 after the amalgamation. So pretty much the centre's objectives are to provide a safe space and learning experience, promote healthy, active and safe living, and increase social and community connectedness, build personal resilience and provide outreach to Cardwell. This has since ceased due to the fact that they don't have the ability to employ a staff member for a longer period of time. So the centre is basically a space for youth to attend after school to keep them off the streets, often gives a meal to those vulnerable kids, and is there to keep them safe from sometimes not so safe families. Council, like I said, Council has funded on a regular basis for the last 15 years, and we're just sort of looking at it and reviewing whether or not that is to continue, and if so, maybe review it on an annual basis. We have, obviously this year numbers have decreased because of COVID, but they've still maintained a connection with those youth through social media and the likes.
Thank you, Ms Saffron. Any questions for the officer? Moved by Councillor Millwood, seconded by Councillor Farinelli. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Ms Saffron.
Thank you.
Move on to item 4, economic activation and tourism. Item 4.1, page 42, CCRC Tourism Monthly Report, and Mr Blanchett will present this report. Welcome.
Good morning. Morning, Mr Blanchard. Good morning, Council. It's Cassowary Christmas. Merry Christmas. Yes, well, school is out, so Merry Christmas. And because with school out, it signals the start of what should be a fairly busy Christmas season for our businesses. Talking to a couple of local operators yesterday, the bookings are looking good. And a challenge for one cafe in Mission Beach is to find 4 staff. So that's how busy they're getting prepared for the season ahead. Through the chair, I'll take the report as read and just touch on a couple of highlights from the November. There'll be more on the Cardboard mountain bike project next report, as we have community update meetings and project meetings next week, Tuesday next week, on that project. But just wanted to note the great progress we've had with the Girramay and Gurrigan in regards to the cultural sensitive aspects of the project, which is progressing well. But if I can, there'll be more in the December report following the project meetings. Another cultural highlight of November, or probably the cultural highlight, was the opening of the Bush Tucker Garden on the Monday of NAIDOC week. And this has been really appreciated by the Girramay people. Marsha Jerry has since been visiting the visitor centre for a cup of tea every now and then to talk about the garden and hopefully to do more activity there. And just want to recognise it was a valuable joint project by Council, Gurrigan gardeners who did the planning and the planting, Girramay and the Cardroon District Historical Society and community events, and importantly noting our gardening team who look after parks and gardens in Kabul, who work with Gurrigan to ensure the garden will be hydrated and maintained going forward. So it's been a great community project there. And probably noting the bush ribbon that was used for the opening. This was a step forward. Rather than a traditional opening ribbon, there was a bush ribbon of native make. Always looking to evolve our services and improve them. We've introduced a new simple poster for when visitors stroll into the centres. They'll see a local tours board now. And this will reflect tours, not every location in the region, but tours that have a connection to booking a product or a local tour or an experience. So there's a booking opportunity. So it'll highlight the experience, and we've internally done that art. So the Kabul one's up, and Tully and Innisfail are being worked on right now. Local businesses, I mentioned a few this morning. That was an update as recent as yesterday. Just want to mention the Garradunga Hotel. New owners in there, and they've had a nice welcome from the community. They're proactively working while the kitchen's not open. They're working with referring on other caterers to work cooperatively, and they especially wanted a copy of the 102 Things to Do to share with their visitors, which was quite a positive request and welcome for the Garradunga. The other sort of highlights I was going to mention is the activity seems to have been working over the season. Given the COVID environment, it's been a tough one, but it seems to be working in general, that tourism has been fairly busy. Taking me to the stats, I just want to sort of highlight despite the year, this financial year so far, we're still talking to over 3,000 visitors in a month. So 3,000 conversations with visitors looking to know more about what to do here and where to stay and play. 1,500 of those are actually asking about things to do every month. So really valuable conversations. Flagging Tully. Tully's actually had the most visitors so far this year, ahead of Mission Beach Tourism, which doesn't happen often. Importantly to note there is this is without, as I mentioned last report, without having the Tully Mill tours, which is probably around 2,000 visitors that we would have had this year, and the Tully rafting has been operating this year, so it's a fairly good sign of the times. If I can, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to touch on a couple of things that will be in the December report, but they're quite notable and they'll be lost over Christmas and New Year's. Talking about the rafting, it's been announced recently that a company has bought Raging Thunder, which is a good sign for the future. So Cairns Adventure Group has purchased the company, and we're due to start conversations with them next week to see what their plans are for the future of Tully River rafting. Of note, TTNQ, Tourism Tropical North Queensland, have released the new regional brochure for next year, and some of our epic scenery features on the cover. So you may recognise Zoe Bay, Hinchinbrook Island. So this island, as part of the Cassowary Coast, has suddenly taken a prominent position on the main regional brochure for tourism in the north. I use the word epic for good reason. Ironman Cairns also used Zoe Bay as a feature post, recommending all the athletes when they come in June to travel the region, and suggested visiting Hinchinbrook Island and Zoe Bay. So it's getting us some good profile at the moment, Mr Mayor. Zoe Bay. A couple of other little highlights were recently ABC interviewed Patrick from Tropical Coast Tourism and a couple of local businesses about championing for more support through tourism for the region going ahead. And finally, the good news is entries have opened for Bull Defiance 2021. Now this event was sold out for this year. We all know it didn't happen, but entries have opened on Tuesday this week, and we can only anticipate it'll be fully booked again. The benefit of the early opening is there's almost 10 months of promotion of that event in our region in the build-up. And that's a summary of the report, Mr Mayor.
Thanks, Mr Blanchett. Any questions for the officer?
Yep. Yeah, through the chair, of course. It's a project meeting on Tuesday, and there'll also be a site for Mill in Kabul at the community hall. Yeah.
Councillor Baines.
Less a question and more a comment and a recommendation. Mr Blanchett, I attended the Jazz in the Afternoon at the Con Theatre that was done with the, I think they're called the Innisfail Town Band, but they're from all over the region. It really is the Cassowary Coast Town Band. And I understand that was funded as part of a RADIF project. And it was wonderful to see. We had some youth there, some of our students playing in the band. One of them, the pianist, is a 14-year-old boy from Tully who was studying in London until COVID hit, and the talent and the amazing entertainment that afternoon was just incredible. So I'd like to highlight it's a fantastic tourism event, and I think we need to expand upon these within the Cassowary Coast as the heart of the wet tropics and the birthplace of the Great Barrier Reef, but also that our local talent is just incredible. And thank you to the RADIF program for allowing these sort of things to go on. There were 7 school students played on the day, Mr Mayor, and they brought in a very famous trumpet player whose name eludes me at the moment, but when he left on Saturday, he flew back to Brisbane to perform at the Carols in the Park function the next day. World-renowned, Lachlan, I'm going to say Mackenzie, but I may have that wrong, pardon me. But
Thank you, Councillor Baines.
Thank you, and they asked me to pass out congratulations on.
Okay. Councillor Farinelli.
Through the chair, Mr Blanchett, I was sent a copy of that brochure and I've shared it, actually showed the councillors a couple of copies of that as well. The thing that concerned me the most about it, and there's some beautiful photos and everything in there, but there's nowhere is there a reference to the Cassowary Coast as a region. And I just hope that in the future there are many coasts, but there's only one Cassowary Coast, and I think it's very important that we understand the importance of building on that brand and ensuring people understand where we are and what we have to offer. So just hope in the future there'll be more reference to the Cassowary Coast.
Thank you, Councillor Farinelli. Any further comments or questions, councillors? If not, would somebody move the recommendation that the report be received and noted? Moved by Councillor Baines, seconded by Councillor Farinelli. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr Blanchett.
Thank you, Mr.
We move on to item 5, Governance, Environment and Finance. Item 5.1, page 47. An addition to the Register of Pre-Qualified Suppliers. And Mr Vick will present this report.
Welcome. Good morning all.
Morning, Mr Vick.
All right. Today I'll be presenting a recommendation for an addition to the register of pre-qualified suppliers for trade and technical services. A tender was advertised in October 2018 to invite suppliers to be considered for the register of pre-qualified suppliers for advertising and media services. Due to varying circumstances, the Advertising and Media Services Register was not finalised. Local supplier HD Evolution had applied for the Advertising and Media Services Register and has been impacted by the decision not to proceed. HD Evolution have since requested inclusion for the Register of Pre-Qualified Suppliers for Trade and Technical Services. The relevant paperwork has been submitted for consideration and has been assessed by the procurement team as conforming. Acceptance of the Register of Pre-Qualified Suppliers does not guarantee work with Council. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr Vick. Any questions for the officer? Councillor Farinelli.
Mr Sophia does incredible work in this region, and for that reason I'd like to move the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Farinelli. Seconded by Councillor Millwood. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Vick. Merry Christmas.
Have a Cassowary Christmas.
We move on to item 5.2, page 49, the finance report, and Mr Singh will present this report. Welcome.
Good morning, all. Councillors, Mr. Singh. The finance report for November. So, councillors, without going through the full report, I'll just highlight some of the key things. So, in terms of our operational revenue, so we are currently tracking at around 45.6 million against a budget of 45.7. We are slightly tracking under budget in terms of operational expenditure, councillors. So again, sitting at 38.1 compared to a budget of 41.2. So we're slightly tracking under. So overall, our net position is a surplus of 2.9 million at this point in time against a budget of $8,000. So we are tracking ahead of budget. In terms of the cash balance, councillors, so we have around 44.9 million in the bank. Again, a number of those are committed funds, particularly when it comes to capital projects and other commitments that council has. And from a capital delivery point of view, councillors, we are currently tracking at around $28 million, including commitments, which is at around 47%. So we are tracking slightly behind in terms of overall figures, and still some challenges ahead in terms of wet weather and trying to complete more projects going forward. So, councillors, without going through in detail the rest of the report, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Any questions for the officer? Recommendation being moved by Councillor Farinelli, seconded by Councillor Purban. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr Singh. We move on to item 6, asset sustainability. Item 6.1, page 63, water section, performance report, and Mr Smart will present this report. Welcome.
Good morning, Mr Smart.
Morning, councillors.
Morning, Mr. Smart.
This morning, I'd just like to present to you the performance report for the water section. If you like, this is our annual report. It follows regulatory requirements from the water regulator about mandatory reporting. In October, Council lodged its summary data that is mandated by the state. That's included in Appendix A of that document. And the performance report reflects discussion on some of those performance indicators. It also includes discussion on our customer service standards. We also have a mandatory requirement to talk about our compliance with drinking water standards and our testing outcomes. And we also just discuss the actions taken under the improvement plan in our drinking water quality management plan. It is a fairly comprehensive document, and as I said, a lot of the stuff in it is mandated by the state.
I'd like to thank the staff involved in the preparation of the document. There is a lot of work goes into the collation of the data, and there's assistance there from my own team as well as finance, and I'd like to just publicly express my appreciation of their efforts. Some of the things that I'd like to draw your attention to, the customer service standards, there are a few indicators there that we're doing quite well with. For example, our response times to water main breaks is very good, 88% being attended to within 5 hours, which is a very good outcome. Some of the less outstanding outcomes, we have an extremely high rate of water main breaks. It's reported there that we have 20.75 breaks per 100 kilometres of water main. That is much higher than our target level of service, which is 12. We are working to improve that outcome with our renewal program. At the moment, most of the renewals are focusing on the old cast iron mains, which, as you know, I've reported previously, have got that extreme internal ferric corrosion problem. So that has been the majority of our focus. In the coming years, we will start moving towards increasing our efforts on replacing the AC mains, and a lot of the AC mains are the ones that are really causing the failure issues. There is a history of a lot of the mains that were installed 50 plus years ago weren't installed in accordance with sort of best practice. A lot of them were gifted assets from farmers, and they weren't bedded properly. The materials they were using probably weren't entirely appropriate, and that unfortunately is reflecting in a lot of these failures that we're having. That said, we're getting to the failures quickly, so that's the good news. The other indicator I'd like to talk about is the rate of system water loss. We are losing an extreme amount of water from our systems that we're not capturing through meters. So the rate of system water loss reflects broken mains, it reflects meters that aren't working properly, defective meters, just general leakage in the network, overflows from reservoirs. There's a number of factors that contribute to that number, but we're clearly well outside of our target that we want to achieve there. I have indicated in the document that we've got strategies in place to improve that rate of water loss, and really, as we speak, we've got a program out there to try and detect a fairly significant leak in the Innisfail system, which the Innisfail one is probably one of our major concerns, because we produce that water, it's fully treated, so it costs more to that treatment cost, that pumping cost. So it's in our interest to really get on top of that problem in Innisfail. In terms of water quality, we are maintaining a very high standard of water quality, and our testing is showing that. With the completion of the Bulgan intake reservoir, we are going to see, I would hope, the elimination of bore water alerts in the Tully scheme. It's been a long time coming, and it's really one of the major achievements of this calendar year. So I'm looking forward to. I don't often say this, but I'm looking forward to the wet season, and I'm sure the staff are too, because there'll be a lot less call-outs in the middle of the night, and it's really going to be good for us and good for the community. In terms of sewerage, there was our response times for sewerage incidences probably wasn't as good as it has been in previous years. There were a couple of incidents. We don't have a lot of sewerage incidents, but two did affect the response times with major root ingress that slowed down the rectification of those problems. In terms of achievements by the group, I'll just take some time just to run through some of the key achievements the water section achieved in 2019-20. We supplied close to 6,000 million litres of drinking water, population of about just over 25,000. We've continued with our water renewal program, and we replaced about 7.1 kilometres of water main in the year, which is a pretty good outcome considering that COVID did affect our production for a couple of months of the year. We weren't able to, the capital works teams weren't operating. We have completed most of the smart metering for the Tully water supply scheme. Some of the rural areas to the south still haven't been, the smart metering hasn't been deployed to them. The current meter read process that we're going through has demonstrated that there's a lot of meters in and around Innisfail that have failed in the last 6 to 12 months, so we will be switching some of our focus in that meter renewal program and the smart metering to Innisfail to rectify that problem. We finished the 4.6 megalitre reservoir at Wheatley's Hill in November-December last year, and that was quite successful in keeping the South Mission, Wongling areas off boil water alerts when the balance of the Tully scheme was affected. As I've mentioned, the Bolgan Creek intake reservoir, it commenced during the financial year, and as I said, it was completed in October. The Stodders Hill Reservoir, our flying saucer, that was completed in the financial year, and that roof is it's a very innovative approach to the problem, and something that the team deserve credit for thinking outside the box in that solution. Replaced a floating vinyl roof that was badly torn and was leaking, and the new lightweight aluminium roof, besides being a talking point when you drive past it, is a really excellent outcome. One of the other significant achievements was the completion of the revaluation of all of our water assets. Oricon were engaged by council to do that work for us, but it was still a significant involvement from our team, and there were some innovation in the outcomes of that revaluation exercise that will have a demonstrated effect on the depreciation expenses going forward, which is particularly for some of the rural 100 mil mains. So that was a good outcome. In terms of sewage, probably the two standouts, we've continued with our sewer relining program. That is a massive investment by council to reduce the amount of infiltration into our sewage network. That's been going on for a number of years now, and I would expect within 3 years we would have relined our whole network. So that's a great outcome. We also replaced the SPS 3 sewer rising main in Innisfail. I have reported on this asset previously. The ductile iron main had been severely scoured in the invert and was failing quite regularly. So we replaced the ductile iron main with a polyethylene pipe. Where it was under the roads and difficult to build, we pulled that through the existing ductile iron main, which was a good outcome for the community with significantly less disruption to the road network. And in the open areas, the Corso Park and Wrights Park, that was undertaken by day labour, and we did that conventional trench technology. So again, a good use of innovation and a cost-effective way of replacing an asset that had failed prematurely. We also have done some reasonable works at the Tully sewage treatment plant to upgrade that facility, and we have, aside from completing a new control building, built a new inlet works with a grit removal facility, which is something that the original plant didn't have. We get a lot of sands and grit coming from the beaches, and over time it accumulates in the treatment tanks, and it does affect the treatment process. So this is an automated system to get rid of that grit in the front end, which is great. Also, the revaluation exercise for sewerage, there was a very innovative methodology taken to our sewer relinings, which again will have significant impact on the depreciation of expenses of our gravity sewer lines. Effectively, we've split the asset value for our old clay gravity sewers to reflect a trench component, which because we've relined the pipes effectively don't have to be replaced for another 80 years. So the trenched component in the depreciation expense has been given an 140-year depreciation life. That's the brief summary of what we've achieved there, and that's a pretty unique innovation that we've brought to that valuation exercise. That's sorry about that, councillors. It took a bit longer, but it is a fairly substantive document, and makes for great nighttime reading.
Thank you, Mr. Smart. Any questions for the officer?
I'd just like to commend you, Mr. Smart, and your team on all the work and efforts that you've put in throughout this year. I really am going to be very happy about the decreased number of boil water alerts due to the brand new Bulgan reservoir. It's a credit to you and your team. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Millwood. Any further comments, councillors? Just two complimentary pieces. I want to acknowledge former Mayor Cremastis and the team who endorsed the vision of Mr. Smart and Mr. Goodman about eliminating the boil water alerts. When you have third world standard of water and you're paying high rates, not a good combination. Politically, we understood that it had to be addressed, but a lot of the grant writing and the design work was done by the former council. I'd like to acknowledge them in relation to the new infrastructure. And on a lower scale, we had an incident recently at Wangan where the smart meters were fitted inappropriately in some cases. Complaints were surfacing, and in the last period, our staff have responded in a positive fashion. Councillor Purban and I attended the Mundu School Awards night the other night, expecting all the comments to be about the proposed footpath to make it safe access to the school. No, they're all happy about that. The compliments were flowing about Council's response to relocating those smart meters. So on behalf of the Wangan community, thank you very much for doing that. Any further questions, councillors? Comments? Would somebody move the recommendation, please? Moved by Councillor Bain, seconded by Councillor Millwood. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. We now move on to item 6.2, the backflow prevention policy, and Mr Smart will present this report.
Councillors, this agenda item recommends the adoption of a backflow prevention policy and the associated backflow prevention management plan. Backflow in water supply systems generally occurs where there's a higher pressure inside the property than particularly the water main. If there's, for example, a burst water main and the property is elevated or there's pumps being used in the property, it's quite possible for contaminated water to flow backwards into the water reticulation network or even into the premises zone drinking supplies. Backflow prevention devices are plumbing fittings that prevent that reversal of contaminated water. The Plumbing and Drainage Act and the associated regulations have mandated that local governments have a requirement to maintain a register and be contacting owners about the maintenance and testing requirements of their backflow, of their testable backflow devices. To date, Council has not been doing this, and we have an obligation under this legislation to be enforcing this requirement. Typically, most owners aren't aware of their obligations under the Act to at least have their testable backflow devices checked at least once a year, and the plumbers with the backflow accreditation are supposed to be advising Council of the outcomes of those tests, and Council is supposed to be keeping a record of all that. The proposed policy and backflow prevention plan is intended to formalise Council processes to ensure that all parties are adhering to the requirements of the legislation. There is a proposal within this agenda item to extend a 2-year amnesty period to all property owners with testable devices to have an accredited plumber check their devices and get any necessary repairs done and then advise Council. And there is certainly no intent to charge any fees during that amnesty period, and we will be assisting as much as we can with public information as to why this is necessary and what you should be looking for. The expectation is that towards the end of January we will advise all the property owners who we suspect have a testable backflow device of their requirements, of the 2-year amnesty. Plumbers will be given a an opportunity to meet with us before that letter goes out, so that we can brief them on our expectations and remind them of their obligations. The local plumbers are going to be key to this this policy working, and we need to have them on side and ready for, I guess, a reasonable volume of work coming their way. Council also has its own facilities that require upgrading to ensure that their backflow devices are working. There's already budgeted funds in this financial year to kick off that work, and we have to be setting an example to the community, and that aspect of work is underway. So the recommendations really are that Council approves the backflow prevention policy and the associated backflow prevention management plan, that we undertake a program of public information and awareness to assist with the implementation of the policy, that we will be advising owners in early 2021s about the requirements of the policy, that there is a 2-year amnesty from the date of that letter. No fees will be applied for the initial implementation of the register, but after that 2-year period there will be an annual maintenance fee for the register. We don't expect that fee to be substantive. It's just enough to cover Council's administration costs. Final point is that we will meet with regional plumbers prior to the issuing of the correspondence, advising them of the detail of the policy.
Thank you, Mr. Smart. Any questions for the officer? Councillor Barnes.
Yeah, good. Yes, good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Smart, what rough costings have you put together that it'll cost the average, say, shop owner between the council fees and the plumber inspection fee?
Councillor, it is highly dependent on the type of fitting and the size of the connection. If there is the worst case scenarios are large buildings with separate fire mains. Those fire mains are typically 100 mil diameter, and they will definitely have testable check valves on them, and those devices, if they need to be replaced, could be a couple of $1,000, if they need to be replaced. The other extreme is a small 20 mil service might also have a device on it, and I mean the maintenance on some of those is less than $40. So there's a wide range of potential costs, and it's not something that I just can't give an average cost to.
So I'd recommend that if this recommendation does go through today, I can see a little bit of backlash after 2023 when they start having to pay for plumbers to inspect and also a council annual fee. And I just suggest to fellow councillors that each and every one of us do a study and have the facts and figures, because anyone who's going to be lumped with another bill will be asking the council a lot of questions, I'd say.
Councillor, if I may respond to that, we will endeavour to pull together some indicative costs. We're already maintaining our devices, and we know that some of the backflow devices we're using are very low cost to replace. It's just basically a diaphragm that just has to be pulled out and another one dropped in. But as you move into some of the larger devices, and given that some of these devices have not been tested, have not been maintained since they were ever installed, potentially some of these devices are 15 years old. They may not be able to be maintained, they may have to be replaced, and the cost of that could be much higher than just a little 20mm device. It's difficult to put an answer to that question.
Thank you, Mr. Smart. Are you happy with that response, Councillor Barnes? Any further questions for the officer? I've got a question in relation to state compliance matters, and just want to know if you have any stats on benchmarking against our neighbouring councils. Are we leading the way on this policy in terms of implementation, or are we lagging behind?
Yes, unfortunately, we are probably the last council in the region to implement a backflow policy and introduce effective registration of devices within its region. So the state government have been ramping up their interest in this this element of the legislation, and it's only a matter of time before there's a significant knock on the door, and we just have to do it.
Okay, thanks for that clarification, Mr. Smart. Councillor Millwood.
Through the chair, so just Mr. Smart, I just wanted to make clear that this is not a new council initiative. This is a state government proposal, and we have to follow suit because everybody else has already done this, and we're on the back foot here.
Yep.
Yes, totally.
Yeah, you've answered it, Councillor Millwood, spot on. Any further comments or questions, councillors? It's no different to the grease trap issue, except back then, rightly or wrongly, we got criticised for leading the way. I just wanted to clarify, we're trailing way behind on a compliance matter. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when we do it, and we're going to do it today, if somebody moves a recommendation. Councillor Barnes. Moved by Councillor Barnes, seconded by Councillor Millwood. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Smart. We move on to item 6.3, page 215, Principles of Community Use of Assets. And Mr. Fisher is going to deliver this report.
Good morning, councillors.
Morning.
Morning, Mr. Fisher. Councillors, the report today seeks to establish some principles to provide council and staff with some guidance as we move to, set some greater level of framework, management approach, and ultimately a policy in how we work with our numerous community groups throughout the region, and in particular the ones that utilise community-owned assets or ratepayer-owned assets. Historically, there's been a variety of different arrangements that have been in place throughout the region. Many of those are quite old and predate the Cassowary Coast region. And I guess even since the creation of the Cassowary Coast, there's been a number of different arrangements over time. I guess while that has been the case, one thing that we really note, and this council has been proactive in dealing with, is getting a better handle of the costs of the infrastructure and the assets and services we provide. And that irrespective of how these assets came to be, whether they were funded by a grant or by a club, many of them sit on our asset register and cost the ratepayers money in terms of depreciation and ongoing costs. As we all know, QTC have highlighted that to council in the past, and this process complements the asset rationalisation project which we have underway. to help us proactively manage our infrastructure into the future. There would be significant benefits as Council seeks to progress and develop into this space, largely around greater consistency, integrity and transparency, that we will be able to work with groups to help align in our own strategic priorities and our own operational and corporate plans. We'll lower our risk profile as we'll actually have arrangements in place and visibility of how our facilities are used, so we can ensure that's done safely and legally. And it will also improve the financial sustainability of our community and get greater value for money for our ratepayers. And in that value for money, it will also mean that we'll be able to partner with groups where that investment of ratepayers' money really provides the greatest community benefit. I guess what we're proposing today is a number of principles which we have recommended for Council, and that we really want Council to have discussion and make sure you're comfortable with what's there. We note that there is a vast variety of user groups in our region, from some clubs with hundreds of members through to some with probably a handful of members. And while we understand that a framework and policy will have to have flexibility to work with that variety, what we're seeking to do is to be able to have consistent principles in dealing with that. So if people ask, why does this group get this arrangement, obviously there's differences between groups, and that's part of our community. But if we can say we are dealing with those groups under a set of consistent principles, that really gets us a long way down the track in terms of seeking to provide consistency and support for a variety of groups. So my intention is not to read those principles out, as I take it you would have all read them, but I'm happy to answer questions and also welcome feedback on those principles.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Any questions for Mr. Fisher? I'd just like to make a comment. This is not something new in terms of asset rationalisation. Previous council did it with Perry Harvey Jetty and Marina Lakes Pool. We did it without the principles. That's the key issue today. So I fully endorse the due process that staff want to follow. The other critical evidence is QTC tapped us on the shoulder 5 years ago, said, guys, you've got to do this. It's not sustainable. And I mentioned benchmarking before. I get embarrassed when ratepayers say, I've got a property on the table and I've got a property in Ingham. Why is it that price and we're paying this? And you don't really know how to answer it until you go back to the Govinda Singh piece in December last year, the asset value per rateable property. We're nearly double. 74,000 per rateable property here, 42 in Tableland and 46 in Ingham. So it comes back to the process. As I said, we were able to address Perry Harvey and Marina Lakes Pool because there was appetite in the community. But it's going to be tougher going forward, and we've got to have a proper process to follow, and these principles set the footprint for us to follow. Has anybody got an appetite to move the recommendation, please? Moved by Councillor Farinelli. You want to say something? Over to you, Councillor Millwood.
So through the Chair, I just wanted to say that I'd like to commend the group that we have currently working on the asset rationalisation program with their progress, and I think that they're doing a great job, and to keep on keeping on, and we will get this job done, and it'll be beneficial for everybody in the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Millwood. Councillor Farinelli.
Just before I move the recommendation, I just want to say well and truly overdue doing this, and definitely came up in some of the discussions we had through that whole asset rationalisation work with the community consultative group. So happy to move the recommendation and everything there.
Through
you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, look, this just to reinvigorate, this user group isn't making the decision. Council at the end of the day is making the decision. They're just there to give us some guidance where we're going. The user groups out there have got some say in everything, but yeah, it's at the end of the day, this is a council decision, not the user group's decision to make these decisions.
Yeah, good clarification. Thanks, Councillor Pervin. Any further comments, councillors? Councillor Farinelli's moved. Do we have a second? Councillor Millwood, all in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Thank you. We now move on to item 6.4, page 219, capital report, and Mr Fisher will present.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through the Chair, Councillors, this is our report as of end of November. We are approximately 48% through the deliverable program, total budget of $59 million in our capital works program. There's been some number of projects that have been completed, and I'd just like to highlight there the Andaliki Road intersection that's been completed. That was partly funded by the federal government, and that enables the transport operators along Ann Road south of Tully now to use B-double trucks, and in future, once TMR improve the access on the highway up to 30-metre combinations. A really good efficiency outcome there for the operators who support our local industry and contribute a lot to our community. So a good outcome. Also like to just flag that the Rankin Street Footpath project, the current plan shows that starting in the new year, and that's to complete the section of Rankin Street in front of the Shire Hall, the entire length of that block on which the Shire Hall sits. So that will be a large project undertaken in the CBD, but one that is consistent with Council's master plan, and will go a long way to tidy up that section of the streetscape. One project, and I'd just like to flag that's not on that report, but because it's an operational project, is the Tully field upgrade. I'll just take the opportunity to say that the turf is due to go down and on Monday, and that we ask people to understand that there's still another process in January where we will install some additional sand slit drainage into that field. So if we do get some big downpours over the break and there is some water on the field, that is expected, because there's more work to be done in January to fully drain that field. So if people are worried that we haven't done a good job, just wait until it's finished before you make that call. So happy to take any questions about any of those
Thank
items.
you, Mr Fisher. Any questions, Councillor Millwood?
Through the Chair, I'd just like to say that they've completed one part of the footpath upgrade in Tully, which is Watkin Bryant Street. Done a very good job. Like to commend them on that job, and also the finishing of the roundabout at the Five Ways. Well done.
Thanks, Councillor Millwood. Any further comments? Just got a couple of questions. On page 226, the culvert that's going to be installed on Lacars Road, will that have a bitumen seal over the top of it to protect it from when the river breaks? Because that's a hot spot. It does wash out yearly. We spend a lot of maintenance dollars there. Great that the new culvert's going in, because the residents believe that was what was required, and now the engineers seem to agree with it. But will it be protected by some bitumen seal on top?
My understanding at this stage, Mr Mayor, is that it's not going to have bitumen seals, but it will have some stabilised pavement material, which won't offer the same resilience, but in terms of, I guess it will provide improved resilience to that section of road. And obviously with the culvert, the amount of overtopping and damage that pavement will be subjected to will be greatly decreased. So I would suggest that we should see how this work fares. Obviously putting a seal and onto an unsealed road comes at a significantly greater cost than the installation of the culvert and some stabilised backfill material.
Yep.
So.
One further request from the community. The viewing platform opposite the Innisfail Pool, great outcome, work for Queensland funding. Sadly, visitors and locals alike want to get out there at night and get a photo of the Jubilee Bridge, and the vegetation is that thick. Can we get a window, a haircut or something to let people get a view of the bridge at night? Because everybody's praising the project. The criticism's coming about being able to take a photo from that platform. I think it's a fair call.
Sure. Councillors, I know there is some there's money in the Works for Queensland program for Johnson River revegetation or vegetation removal and maintenance. Obviously, we'll have to check the legal requirements around clearing vegetation and the extent to which we'd have to do that before I can give you firm advice on whether that's achievable or not. So,
Yeah. I just want to clarify. I don't want it cleared. I want a haircut. That's all I want. Any further questions? Councillor Chewy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Fisher. Just, I know we have touched base about the shade sale at Mission Beach Pool, and I know work has begun. If you could just give us an update as the summer is fast approaching. Thank
Through
you.
the chair. Obviously, this is a retrofit project, so to fit this shade structure in is quite a feat and a challenge. As the installation of the pipe work and all the electrical work around the pool wasn't done with this future project in mind, and obviously we have taken our time to try to find some locations we can put foundations in for that structure. So there's been some a vacuum excavation done. Obviously we don't want to sink an auger into our the spaghetti of pipe work and electrical work around the pool. We've now got those some locations identified. Those footings will now be excavated out to the full size we need for the structure. We have worked with a couple of local shade sail providers who also had involvement with the original project. They are providing us pricing on the installation of the shade sail in accordance with our procurement policy, and hope to get them on site in the new year to undertake that installation. So I do apologise to the community that we haven't hit it before Christmas, but I guess there's quite a challenging little project. So.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, we've got Justin. We may as well all have a go at you, Justin. How are we going at Clump Point since the opening? With the parking, with the berths, with the swing moorings? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Through the chair, councillors, we have, first of all, we have now been appointed as facility manager by Main Roads, so that's now hands that facility over to us to manage. I know we did have some good weather on the weekend, and I guess the feedback I've received is that in general most things work as you would expect on a nice day when the weather's good and everyone's out fishing. I went down there Sunday afternoon, and by that stage there was parks available. People were coming and using the facility as you would expect. I have heard and seen there's a bit of bitumen seal that's running onto the footpath in one section there, so we'll get that tidied up, and we have asked the contractor to do a bit of extra wheel rolling of the seal on the southern car park. In terms of the operation of the moorings, we have a session next week with a couple of the people who we are seeking to award or seeking to finalise terms on a mooring to work through the operational plan, which a draft of which has been sent through to Grabumpa. So part of the requirement for the facility to become fully operational and including refuelling is for Grabumpa to issue that operational plan. It's our intention to work with the local operators who have their vessels in Mission Beach at the moment as the first cabs off the rank in terms of priority to get that facility going, and then we'll seek to work with the other operators, many of which are, have to bring vessels from out of town into Mission Beach. So hoping that we can actually come to terms and get some people in there prior to Christmas. Also, update on the access arrangements. We've upgraded and put a more functional lock in there on the gate, and we'll be taking the old chain off and swapping over to that system next week in anticipation of being able to hand out keys to operators to start utilising that facility. So that's what I've heard, but happy to have any more feedback too. So
thanks, Mr. Fisher. Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Probably I'm going to step into the little bit of a haircut conversation, if you don't mind. Mr. Chair, the bird viewing platform has been established, and under the permitting for the bird viewing platform, there is appropriate maintenance that sits within the permitting area. So we'll work with the bird watchers or the ornithologists as we go forward on this program and look at how, I mean, if there's any weeds there, Mr. Mayor, of course we can deal with them quite easily, but once we start playing with marine plants, they're very protected. We've got to be very cautious of what we do. But I know working with Mr. Fisher and his department and working with the ornithologists will get a great result for everybody. And it's a wonderful facility. Councillor Farinelli and I both attended down there with our binoculars and saw some very rare birds. So I look forward to that in the future. Just one added thing before we step off that. The Cassowary Coast River Improvement Trust have developed a plaque in memory of Dr. Peter Ridd, and that is going to be installed down near that facility, Mr. Mayor, as soon as an appropriate rock is found and put into place. So when that's on, I'm sure as a former member of the Trust, you'd love to come down and we'll make a bit of a to-do and open it on the day. So, yep. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Baines. Councillor Farinelli.
Can I just clarify, Mr. Mayor, that Councillor Baines was checking out the birds with feathers with his binoculars? Absolutely, they had feathers.
I take your point, Councillor Farinelli. The Innisfail Pool's across the road. Take your point. Councillor Millwood.
Sorry, just before you go, Justin, is there any report on when we can expect to see some work started on the Greenway Caravan Park?
Sure. Through the chair, I do know that there will be some work on the ground in the new year, and again, still on track to have that open by Easter. In the same way, and you'll see the work in River Drive there is also on track for that Easter period, and obviously that's when we start to see the greatest number of tourists start to come back to our region. So yeah, there will be work there in the new year.
Councillor Chewy.
You win the prize, Mr. Fisher, for the most popular player today. Just while you are here, I will ask about the boat ramp at the back of Jackie Jackie. I know council have worked hard and it's great. We did talk about some steps being put in there, so if we could just get an update from you regarding that. Thank you.
So those steps have been ordered through one of the local fabricators. So the plan is I don't know how many people have launched the boat at Jackie Jackie Street, but the pontoon's a separate pontoon with a gangway that walks down, so it's not a floating walkway. So when you launch a boat, you often use a bow rope and walk and hold your rope as you walk down onto that onto the pontoon. To make that a bit easier, we are installing some stairs, so you'll be able to, instead of having to walk as far, you'll be able to take a few steps up from the ramp right near to the top of the walkway. There's a pole there that will be removed, so it'll actually facilitate far greater access. So just waiting for that fabrication work to be finished off locally, and that will be installed. Sorry, I can't give you a specific time, but it's, yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Fisher. Councillor Pervin.
Mr. Fisher, just at you. The Dunk Island spit in relation to facilities over there. Everything's up and going at this point in time, even with Mayfair going under. Just I've had a few people ask me leading up until the Christmas period, especially Boxing Day in particular. There's quite a number of people that head over there, and they just wanted to know if the facilities are all up and going in relation to toilets and things like that.
Yeah, sure. Councillor, I would be guessing if I gave you an answer on that. So I would suggest I take that on notice and that we work with our comms team to do some general comms on that, so we can get things, the advice correct, and get it broadcast to the community so they can understand exactly what's happening in Dunk Island, if that would be okay.
Just a general comment going back to Councillor Chewy's issue on the shade sales. I think it's unfortunate that after a $10 million facility has been installed, we're talking about a safety issue like shade sales. We've got climate change, hotter days, high skin cancer rate. We talk about slip, slop, slap, but it's not mandated in the funding arrangement with state and federal governments that council will deliver shade sales to look after our kids. And we do it as an afterthought. Tully Pool just got shade sails funded by Rotary. We're fortunate we got Work for Queensland funding to do it at Mission Beach Aquatic Centre, but I really think it's wrong of the state and federal government not to mandate it in the funding agreement. It's something that should be locked in, not something for us to go scrambling, looking for dollars to do later. If we're going to talk slip, slop, slap, let's walk the talk and ask the state and federal government to make it a condition of the funding. I think going forward, I think we should learn from our mistake.
Yes.
Any further comments, councillors? Somebody move the recommendation, please. Moved by Councillor Mains, seconded by Councillor Chewy. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Fisher. Sorry about
To the most popular man in the room, a very Cassowary Christmas.
We move on to item 7, Planning and Regional Development. Item 7.1, page 233, and Mr. Dylan Thomas will present. I highlight Dylan because I've been calling him Daniel for the last 7 months. My apology, mate.
No worries. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, Council.
Morning.
Through the Chair, as per page 233 of the agenda, Council is in receipt of a request for a 100% reduction in infrastructure charges relating to development application RAL 20-0002. The charges relate to a reconfiguring of a lot, one lot into 2 lots on land described as Lot 13 on SP 114071, situated at 27 Joffrey Crescent, Wongling Beach. The application was approved subject to conditions on the 26th of March 2020. An infrastructure charges notice was issued on the 30th of March 2020 for the amount of $29,339.55. Council's Activate Cassowary Coast Development Incentive Reduction Infrastructure Charges Scheme policy came into effect on the 16th of December 2019. In order to be eligible for a reduction in infrastructure charges, the development must be approved and the development permit issued by Council on or after the date of the adoption of the policy, completed within 3 years of the date of the approval taking effect and meet the eligible criteria of the policy. The development has demonstrated that it will provide economic benefits to the Cassowary Coast region and its residents through employment of a local builder and tradespeople for a future dwelling following the registration of the title early 2021. The proposal site is already serviced by existing water and sewerage infrastructure that will increase the maximisation of these assets. A 100% reduction in infrastructure charge for the development would result in a $29,339.55 discount, bringing the revised infrastructure charge to the amount of $0. As the proposed reconfiguring of a lot meets the criteria for eligible development outlined within the policy, it's recommended that Council agree to a 100% reduction in infrastructure charges relating to application RAL 20-0002, subject to all works for the application being completed as per the reconfiguring lot approval prior to March 30th, 2023. Happy to answer any questions Council may have.
Any questions for Mr. Thomas, councillors? Pretty straightforward. Councillor Chewy, you're moving? Moved. Seconded by Councillor Farinelli. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Thomas. We move on to 7.2, page 237, development application for material change of use, air services, and Mr. Jones will present. Welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Jones.
Mr. Jones.
Good morning, everybody. Through the Chair, Council is in receipt of an application which proposes to establish air services, being an aviation facility, on land described as Lot 3, RP 732964, situated at 2224 Tully Mission Beach Road, Mission Beach. The proposed development will comprise a single-storey building, parking spaces, an external helicopter landing pad and a fuel storage area. The proposed development will be located on a portion of the site which is being cleared of vegetation as a result of previous agricultural activities. The front of the building and parking areas will be landscaped with the balance of the subject site being grass. The development proposes to connect to Council's water infrastructure and also proposes to install a conventional septic system. The development proposes to connect to mains electricity and telecommunications via existing infrastructure. The existing vehicle access point from the Tully Mission Beach Road is proposed to be upgraded to service the development. The proposed aviation facility will provide a base for helicopter passenger transport operations, inclusive of island connections from the region's major airports, being Cairns and Townsville. Associated uses including medical transfers, aerial firefighting and search and rescue operations and other emergency activities will also be undertaken from the site on an as-needs and emergency situation basis. The subject site has an area of 11.16 hectares with a frontage of approximately 870 metres to Tully Mission Beach Road. The site is located within the rural zone and has an existing bulk landscape supplies business which has been operating from the site for many years and is proposed to continue to operate. To the north, the site adjoins land located within the township zone, Greater Mission Beach Business Precinct, and is vegetated and vacant. To the east, the site joins land located within the Environmental Management Conservation Precinct and is also vegetated and vacant. To the south, the site adjoins land located within the Environmental Management Conservation Zone and has an established large home site dwelling. To the west, the site adjoins Tully Mission Beach Road, being a state-controlled road. The subject site has been extensively cleared due to previous agricultural activities, with a small area of remnant riparian vegetation located adjacent to a waterway which traverses east-west throughout the site. The site was previously used for cattle raising, however it has not been used for this purpose for a number of years. The closest sensitive receptor is a residential dwelling which is located approximately 360 metres from the proposed aviation facility. The development application was impact accessible and therefore required public notification. The applicant advised that public notification requirements were carried out in accordance with the Planning Act. A total of 62 properly made submissions were received by Council during this period. The submissions are categorised as follows. 55 submissions raised objections to the proposed development and 7 submissions supported the proposed development. In addition to this, Council also received an online petition raising objections to the proposed development with 372 signatures at the time of submissions closing. However, this petition was not considered to be properly made due to the fact it did not state the residential address of all submission makers, and the contents of the submission attached to the petition was not signed by all submission makers. However, although the petition was not considered to be properly made, not considered to be a properly made submission under the Planning Act, Council officers have used discretion to consider a number of these matters raised in the petition during the assessment of the application. Key concerns raised within the 55 submissions objecting to the proposed development include the potential impacts of noise originating from the flight of helicopters to and from and the operation of the facility, the potential impacts of the facility on the local community and local environment, particularly the southern Cassowary, and the potential impacts of a helicopter operation being established in the Mission Beach area. The key points raised within the 7 submissions supporting the proposed development are as follows. The benefit of the proposed development to the Mission Beach area, the benefit to the local economy through the creation of jobs during the construction and operational phases, the small scale of the development and minimal environmental impacts, and the benefit of having a dedicated air service for emergencies in Mission Beach. The proposed development triggered referral to the state government as a concurrence agency, which should provide a response with conditions. The subject site is located within the Regional Landscape and Rural Production Area, as indicated in the Far North Queensland Regional Plan, and it is considered that the application is consistent with the intent of the regional plan, as the impact on the land for rural production is relatively minor. Proposed development will be located on a portion of the subject site, which has been cleared of vegetation as a result of those previous agricultural activities spoken about previously. As no clearing of vegetation is proposed and traffic generation along Tully Mission Beach Road will be limited when compared to the existing background traffic, this will minimise the impact of the surrounding environment, habitat and cassowaries. Therefore, the proposed development does not result in the loss of habitat or the clearing of an environmentally significant area or significant increased traffic movements within the Mission Beach location. The helicopter operations will use a direct eastern flight path from the proposed development to minimise disturbance of faunal species. Once airborne, helicopters will head east over the Coral Sea towards intended destinations. Flights over the Jury, Mariah Creek and Japoon Vale National Parks will not occur as a result of activities within the proposed development. This will minimise the impact of the development. Furthermore, the applicant has confirmed that the majority of helicopters proposed to be stationed at the aviation facility are not proposed to be used for joy flights. The type of helicopters proposed are highly specialised multi-role helicopters and provide for a range of services including aerial firefighting, heavy lift and aerial crane and reconnaissance missions. There is a direct linkage between the specialist nature of these helicopters and the high cost of operation. The number of movements will generally be lower than that would be expected from an out-and-out tourist development. This will help to minimise the impacts of the development. In support of the development, there is currently no formal approved helicopter takeoff and landing facility in the Mission Beach area, with the closest aviation facilities being Tully Airport being 20 kilometres away and a 20-minute drive. Frequently, helicopters have been required to land without formal approvals in place throughout the Mission Beach area. The one that councillors had the most complaints about has been the one across from Cassowary Council at the corner of Seaview Street and Pacific Parade. It's located in a very populated centre in the urban area of Mission Beach. Council officers have received many complaints from Mission Beach residents regarding the use of this site over the years. The proposed development will assist in addressing this ongoing issue by providing a fully compliant Cassowary aviation facility which does not have a flight path over urban areas. Does not expose the community to excessive noise and dust nuisance related to landing and takeoff, and reduces the risk of the community as it is not located within this highly populated area. As discussed previously, the site is heavily vegetated with mature remnant vegetation on 3 of the property boundaries, north, east and south, with the other boundary west being located adjacent to the state-controlled road. The vegetation and road will minimise the impact of the surrounding local community, environment and fauna, particularly the cassowary. In addition, the proposed helicopter landing pad will be grass and will assist in reducing dust nuisance. The refuelling operation will be undertaken within a hangar and within an approved self-bunded container with a maximum fuel quantity of 4,000 litres maintained, limiting the risk of fuel leakage and fire. The applicant has proposed to integrate measures into its daily operations to manage direct impact noise on the local community, environment and fauna. As the site is included within the rural zone of the planning scheme and has historically been used for agricultural purposes, sugarcane or bananas or any other agricultural use could be established on the site without planning approval. The operation of these farms could include aerial spraying by helicopter on an as-needs basis. In addition to this, there are a number of other farms within the Mission Beach and wider Cassowary Coast area which use aerial spraying by helicopter on sugarcane and bananas. To ensure that the impact of the proposed development on the surrounding locality is minimised, the development has been conditioned to provide for the following. Limiting the hours of operation, including the takeoff, flight and landing of helicopters to 6 a.m. to 6 p.m, 7 days a week, with no takeoff, flight and landing of helicopters or audible noise from the facility permitted outside these hours, with the exception of emergency situations. Ensuring the helipad meets the standards and recommendations for heliports as set out in the relevant CASA guidelines and standards. Ensuring that once airborne, helicopters will head directly over the east of the Coral Sea prior to heading towards the intended destinations. Ensuring that the operations of the facility are limited to helicopters operated exclusively by the applicant or another related entity operated by the director shareholders of the applicant and owner. The provision of adequate on-site car parking to contain the operations of the development within the site. The requirement for adequate fuel, storage and bunding, and the requirement that noise from the site must not emanate from the subject land to a degree that would create an environmental nuisance having regard to the Environmental Protection Act and the Environmental Protection Regulations. It is noted that the proposed development is conditioned to allow for temporary relaxation of some of these conditions in the event that helicopter flights and operations are required in response to emergency situations. An emergency situation is where the company is requested to assist the state and or federal government. Examples of this may include medical retrieval, search and rescue activities and natural disasters responses where required. The proposed development is considered to represent an appropriate use of the land given the rural nature and separation of residences. In summary, the proposed development does not compromise the intent of the rural zone in this particular location, as the impact on the land for rural production, surrounding residents and the environment is relatively minor. Therefore, the application is generally consistent with the provisions of the Cassowary Coast Regional Planning Scheme and Far North Regional Plan. The proposed development for material change of use for air services is recommended for approval, subject to reasonable and relevant conditions. I'm happy to answer your questions, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr Jones. Councillor Tui.
Yes, thank you, Mr Jones. I would just like to move that the consideration of the material change of use application before Council be deferred until Council's January 2021 meeting. I feel this will give councillors more further opportunity for discussions about the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tui. Are you moving that? Yes. Do we have a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Barnes. Okay. Any further comments or questions, councillors?
Yeah, I've got some comments.
Councillor Barnes first. He wants to speak to the motion. As the seconder, you can speak to the motion.
I think the planning department.
I personally think the planning department's done a tremendous, intense job of this application, and I think the applicants have done a great job. Number one, for picking our shire to come to, like they could have picked many other shires. I think it's going to be a great asset to our shire. if it's in the right place is my only question. I'm not questioning the planning department. You've done a wonderful job. Look at this. How many pages of that? So I'm going to go with Councillor Chewy today, and that is the first meeting back next year, isn't it? Yes. So I hope that we do not frighten this helicopter company off through making this decision, and I hope our planning department don't think in any way that we think they haven't done a wonderful job. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. Councillor Millwood.
Through the chair, I've got a couple of questions for you there. Can you just let the public know why the particular applicant doesn't have to connect to the sewage?
Through the chair, Councillor Millwood, the site's zoned rural and it's not included in our priority infrastructure area. Therefore, for consistency, we don't condition that people have to connect to our sewage. In addition to this, there's a locational requirement in the fact that that main is a high pressure main and will require significant works to be able to connect to that. So we decided not to condition that as part of it for consistency across the board.
Also, if the particular operation were to go outside of their operating hours, what would happen?
Through the chair, Council, we would go down there and we would receive complaints about that, and they would be in breach of their conditions under the Planning Act, and we would serve them with the notice.
Okay. Also, they're operating on just one flight path, is that correct?
Through the chair, correct. So that flight path has been conditioned as part of the proposed conditions.
So if they were to fly from Tully or Mundu Airport, if we're worried about the cassowaries, wouldn't we be flying over a hell of a lot more area that has cassowaries in it?
Through the chair, and residences as well.
And residences. And if they fly from Tully or Mundu, is it also correct that they can fly anywhere within the Casa area? So they can fly over as many houses, beaches, whatever area they want, rather than the restricted flight path that we've given them in this application?
Through the chair, if there's not a restricted flight path as per Council's conditions, it falls back on CASA to basically enforce that. The reason why the applicant has chosen that site is because they can fly directly out and over the Coral Sea without impacting on surrounding residences.
With minimal impact, yep. I've got another question, and also who will be allowed to take off and land at this facility?
Through the chair, Councillor Millwood, it would be restricted to 3 helicopters at any one time, and it will be associated with the applicant owner of Mission Beach Helicopters and any helicopters they actually own there. So.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Millwood. Very relevant questions. Any further questions or comments, councillors? I'd like to say that I'm going to vote in favour of the deferral for 2 reasons. The feedback I've been getting is major concern about the audible noise levels, and I think given we have deferral, it'll give our planning staff an opportunity to speak to the CEO, who we've had a chat with this morning, to see if there's any avenue to do any further independent testing to back up the officer's recommendation to approve. And the other one is the hours of operation. I'm not comfortable with 6 to 6, and I'd like to see our CEO have a talk to our planning staff to maybe narrow that down to a more reasonable hour, maybe 8 or 9 o'clock, not 6 o'clock. So for 2 reasons, I'll support the deferral. It'll give our staff more time to assess critical issues like the audible noise level. And I just want to share a bit of history with you. This is a renowned national company, not a fly-by-nighter. They want to do partnership with council. It's critical for our branding and our reputation that we are open about these types of DAs. And in the year 2000, the Johnson Shire was approached by Steggles, and there was concerns by residents at the time, and the councillors of the day listened to those concerns, and Steggles left Johnson Shire, established in Mareeba, and currently employ 120 workers. So that's the consequence of being negative and not considering good applications from reputable people who are renowned nationally. Any further comments, councillors? Okay, put the vote. The deferral to the vote from Councillor Chewy. All in favour? It's 4, and against? 3 against. That's carried. Thank you. So the matter is now deferred until the January meeting. Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Councillor.
Okay, we'll move on to item 7.3, Delegations Report, and Mr. Horton, is he here? He is. Mr. Horton will present. Welcome, Mr. Horton.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Is this on? Morning, Council. Hope everyone's well.
Morning, Mr. Horton.
7.3, Council, our Delegations Report, which is page 379 of the overall report. Council, for the month of November, our planning approvals for that period for the decisions is 92 compared to 54 at the same time last year. So we're progressing nicely there with 38 applications in front of where we were at the same time for the financial year last year. Our housing approvals dwellings, as you'll see in our stats, remained at another 12 houses approved for the month, 12 last month, 12 this month. Overall, that's brought us up into 80 up until November in the calendar year. A little bit behind from 2015, but I think with the next month and a few months leading into next year, I think we'll be still progressing nicely with the extension of those approvals from the state and so forth under the First Home Buyer Grant Council. So overall, our comparison for our total approvals for the 5 years is up 68 applications on 2015. So we're up to 456 that we approved. That's not the overall applications we've received. That's what we have approved, which is nice and good to see that we're still progressing nicely there. Throughout Council as well, our progression totals, overall dwellings for the year, for the calendar year, is just over 21 million in estimated costs of dwellings, and overall for our total approvals, we're just over 39 million dollars worth of estimated works within the region. So that's progressing nicely as well. So Council, through the rest of it, I think we're progressing nicely here. The guys have been doing a series of inspections, as you can see, and overall with our dwelling totals, we're up from in the financial year, we're up from 6.5 million last year to 14.5 million at the same time in the calendar and the financial basis there, and that's on page 400, Council. And overall, yeah, we're proceeding nicely. Boys are doing, Steve, our building certifier, has done 62 inspections for the month, and Sean, our plumbing and drainage, done 51. So, and our overall searches, Council, we're equal with where we were last year, a couple short, but we're very, very close to what we were in October. And as we know, we had that influx of, searches around that period, and a large amount. But however, we're stable, and we're okay so far. So, Council, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Horton. Any questions for the officer? I'd just like to make a general comment. We hear about the Queensland Government being returned on the back of their excellent management of the borders. That created a Queensland bubble, and I feel very confident that Queensland bubble is going to deliver in tourism terms and in real estate sector. 3 homes have sold in my street in the last month. They were on the market for over 5 years. Real estate agents are saying there's a lot of interest shown, and I just think that, and the First Home Buyer Scheme being extended by the federal government, another good policy decision. I think all those things lined up, and the Queensland bubble, you've only got to look at the number of RVs that are in our area at the moment, and that's helping tourism. Some of the big operators, in terms of franchises, recording record years. So all the doom and gloom around COVID, while it's been sad in the health sense, I think on the economic front, there's going to be a lot of positive vibe in our next period in the recovery from COVID. And it's going to reflect in your stats, no doubt, Mr. Horton, going forward.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think so too.
Any comments or questions for Mr. Horton? Somebody move the recommendation, please. Moved by Councillor Chewy, seconded by Councillor Farinelli. All in favour? Carried unanimously.
Thanks,
Thank
Council.
you. Thanks, Mr. Horton.
Thank you, Mr. Horton.
Okay, we move on to general business. Any general business items, Councillor Chewy?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, just two things. The Village Green Christmas Party is on at Mission Beach tonight, if anybody would like to pop down and see Santa. So thank you, and you're all invited. And secondly, on a more serious note, I have recently become Council's representative on the Domestic and Family Violence Prevention Council, and I'd like to take this opportunity to talk about the Handbag Project, which supports victims of domestic violence. As some may know, I have invited our community to become involved in this over several years, and I'm very happy to say that we will be doing it again in 2021. Whilst this is not the official launch of the project, I thought this would be a good time to think about putting items aside or re-gifting things that could be used to fill our handbags for next year. Together, we have filled over 500 handbags, and I look forward to filling more next year. So it's just something to think about. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chewy. Councillor Millwood.
I'd just like to say thank you to all the staff at Cassowary Coast Regional Council, inside, outside, wherever you work. I'd like to say thank you to you all for all your hard work and support through this first year of my council term. I hope you all have a very safe and Merry Christmas to you all and your family. So, Merry Christmas from me.
Thank you, Councillor Millwood. Councillor Barnes.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think every other councillor around the table also. I just think as councillors in total, I think with the cyclone season coming out, there's very chance that we could even have a cyclone before we meet again for the next meeting. So I think we should be encouraging our neighbours and all our constituents, if you see a bundle of iron or if you see missiles, if we could just encourage the clean-up of that. And I think when we come back next year, if we could go down the road of even going to town on like shipping containers that I see in yards that have been there since Yasi. I know they've all got to come under the Building Act. I'd like to put a proposal to council that we go through and encourage those people to get building applicants and concrete them in the ground if they wish to keep them there. So we'll leave that to our engineers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. Councillor Pervin.
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor. Just to let everybody know, this weekend the Mission Beach fishing competition is being held on the 12th and 13th. For further information, contact the Mission Beach Game Fishing Competition. Should be a good weekend with weather, so it'd be good to see a lot of families get involved. And I too would like to pass on my well wishes to the staff, their families, and also the residents of the Cassowary Coast. I wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Thank you, Councillor Pervin. Any further comments or issues? Councillor Baines.
Not that I'd like to speak up, Mr Chair, but thank you very much. Again, I agree with all the sentiments around the table. It's been a somewhat difficult year. None of us expected a pandemic when we all started our election campaign. This council is working together very well. Cassowary Coast, the heart of the wet tropics, the birthplace of the Great Barrier Reef. 2021 is going to be a great year, and I would like to wish everyone a very, very Cassowary Christmas. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baines. While we're in the Christmas flavour and general business, I just want to share with you, my wife and I attended the Christmas break-up at Innisfail Senior Citizens yesterday, and I was approached by the President, Norm Millard, who expressed great praise for the work our staff did in the budget. They were the beneficiaries of relief in financial terms in the funding we put aside for COVID relief. And to Mr Singh and the finance group, I'd just like to pass on from Innisfail Citizen Fraternity their gratitude for the support they received when they made an application. Again, just to reiterate, as Mayor, best wishes for Christmas and the New Year to our staff and fellow councillors. And yeah, it's been an interesting year, to say the least. Sworn in on the 23rd of April. And I want to, at this point, publicly acknowledge the work our staff did in preparing the budget. While we're getting some praise at the moment about the lowest rate increase in 12 years and good policy like COVID financial relief, we didn't do it. Our staff did it. We ticked it off, certainly. We voted for it and adopted the recommendation, but all the hard yards were done by our staff. And while saying Merry Christmas, I want to say a really sincere thank you for the work you did in our absence while we were waiting to find out if we were elected or not. That's when the hard yards were done. With those few words, I think the CEO might like to say something about the Christmas break coming up, and some comments about a Merry Christmas.
That was somewhat unexpected, Mr. Mayor, but I'll take the opportunity to signal again to council staff in particular that whilst we won't be enjoying our Christmas party this year, we are planning to celebrate Christmas in July in 2021, so we'll have an opportunity to look back and celebrate and reflect upon 18 months rather than 12 months. And I'll also take the opportunity, if I may, Mr. Mayor, to observe that this is the first day of Hanukkah, so which runs from the 10th to the 18th this year. So happy Hanukkah.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Any further comments in general business? If not, would somebody move that we move into committee, please? Councillor Chewy is moved and seconded by Councillor Barnes. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, councillors, staff, we now move out of committee. Would somebody move effectively? We move out of committee. Councillor Pervin, seconded by Councillor Millwood. All in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 9.1, outstanding rates and charges, page 407, and Mrs Vick will present this report. Welcome.
Good afternoon.
Ms Vick.
Council has been undertaking recovery action for a number of properties to recover the outstanding rates, and it is proposed to commence sale of land proceedings and debt recovery action on 43 properties as per Schedule 1 in accordance with the provisions of the Local Government Regulation 2012. Recommendation is that Council proceed to commence the sale of land for the properties detailed in Schedule 1 of this report for overdue rates and charges in accordance with Section 140 of the Local Government Regulation 2012.
Any questions for Mrs Vick on that report? Moved by Councillor Baines, seconded by Councillor Pervin. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you, Mrs Vick. We move on to item 9.2, page 417, contract for the Rankin Street footpath upgrade, and Mr Fisher will present this report.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through the Chair, councillors, this report is for Council to consider awarding contract CCW 000125, the Rankin Street footpath upgrade. This work's partly funded through the Works for Queensland program and seeks to renew the footpath in Rankin Street. The recommendation is that Council award the contract to Alan Sultana Constructions for a sum of $595,767.61 excluding GST.
Thank you, Mr Fisher. Any questions for the officer? Somebody move the recommendation. Councillor Farinelli moves, seconded by Councillor Millwood. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you, Mr Fisher. We move on to item 9.3, the early tender involvement for the dredging of 1 Mile Creek, and Mr Goodman will present the report.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, Cassowary Coast Regional Council recently engaged 3 suitably qualified contractors that were shortlisted through the early tender involvement stage of 1 Mile Creek and Port Hinton Brook all tides access contract. We have received now 3 formal submissions from those suitably qualified contractors and provide this update with recommendations to Council. Recommendation is that Council note that the early tender involvement process for dredging of 1 Mile Creek, Port Hinchbrook, has developed formal proposals that can reasonably be expected to deliver a material benefit with an expenditure of $1.5 million. Secondly, that Council now make a formal submission to the Federal Government for $1.5 million, consistent with the requirements of the invitation from the Deputy Prime Minister, and seek to enter into a deed of agreement with the Department of Infrastructure, Regional Development and Cities through the Community Development Grants Program. And further, Council note that through the early tender involvement process, we have developed detailed cost estimates for the removal of sediment from 1 Mile Creek, the Marina and Boat Maintenance Basin. These estimates indicate that funding in the order of $7.5 million would be required to complete these works.
Thank you, Mr Goodman. Any questions for the officer? Somebody move the recommendation, please. Moved by Councillor Barnes, seconded by Councillor Farinelli. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Further, I would like to move that Council now seek further negotiation with the State and Federal Government to seek funding for the ongoing maintenance of 1 Mile Creek. Would somebody second that? Seconded by Councillor Millwood. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. The CEO has an administrative item that needs to be made on the agenda and made public, and I'll hand over to James.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr Chairman, and I apologise I didn't bring this up in general business, which may have been more appropriate. I intend to take the week before Council's annual closure and the week after Council's annual closure as annual leave, and I'm recommending in accordance with Section 195 of the Local Government Act that Mr Singh be appointed as Acting Chief Executive Officer from that period, the 14th of December to 10th of January 2021, as Acting Chief Executive Officer for that period, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Gott. Any questions for the CEO? Moved by Councillor Farinelli, seconded by Councillor Chewy. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. That now brings the meeting to a close at 12:35. Thank you, everybody. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas.